Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. You have likely noticed that there's been some changes with the podcast. I'm expecting that I will have made these changes by the time you listen to this episode. But yeah, I'm rebranding the show to make it more straightforward and to help people really understand what we're doing here, what's at the core of this show. And if you have noticed, I am slightly deviating and going more into the emotional aspect of creativity and how we can use it for our self discovery and for our healing. Because I believe that once you start to understand yourself better and you can figure out how you work, you start to experience more confidence and more clarity about the things that you are meant to do. You start to understand your gifts and you can start to understand also like a lot of your life experiences and make a different understanding about them, if that makes sense. So, another thing that I want to try moving forward is trying to be a little bit more conversational, more human, more of a regular person. In the beginning, I was scripting my episodes and trying to be very orderly and organized, which I think there's a place and a time for that. I'm not saying that there isn't, but I'm wanting to be more vulnerable in 2025 and really show you that I know where you're at. Like I've been there, and there's no better way to do that than to share it from the heart. And as vulnerable as that can be, I know that it's the way that I want to show up, the way that I'm going to be able to connect with you. So I'm looking forward to this new season of the show. And yeah, just continuing to be experimental, continuing to share what I'm learning, what I am observing, and hopefully pass down the knowledge to you. And hopefully all of us can grow together. Having said that, I want to jump into the topic for today's episode, and I want to talk about this idea of reflection. If you're like me, we are coming off the holiday break and taking time away from work, from podcasting, from everything, obviously opens up the opportunity to reflect and to think about our progress, to think about where we've been. And I think that naturally, the feeling of a new beginning really calls for us to go within and to think about what we want to do and what we want to achieve. But there's also the pressure to figure it out really fast, be quick, right? Move on to the next thing that you're wanting to do. And it's still winter time, and it feels really hard to try to go there because although the holidays are over and now we have to get back to our usual routine, it doesn't mean that we are ready to get back into things. Pressuring ourselves to do that, it feels unnatural. And I think that everywhere you turn, there's also people talking about setting intentions and setting goals. And I think that's a great thing if you are doing it from a place of excitement, from love. But if it feels like it's something that you have to do, that people are saying you need to do to achieve something, I'd be more careful about that. And one of the things I'm personally doing this year is flying by the seat of my pants a little bit more. For many years, I have been that girl that likes to have her plan, be organized. For example, last year I had 12 goals in general, and by the middle of the year, some of these goals don't make sense anymore, and I just got rid of them, and I didn't really continue with them. I didn't really need goals at that point. I was just like, I have a general idea of where I want to go, and I can just take it from here. And that feels hard to say because I think we all want to believe that having a really clear plan is going to keep you from struggling, feeling insecure, or feeling like you have control over what's going to happen. But the reality is that we don't have control over anything, and we have to respond to life as it comes. For many of us, it's really scary. It's really scary to have to figure out how to do things with uncertainty, with fear, and trying to put yourself out there. to do the things that you want to do is really challenging. Personally, I'm on this new camp of letting myself flow and letting myself experience more freely without having the restriction of having to achieve something in particular. And I've been chatting with friends who feel similarly and who have inspired me to take more of this free form approach to living and to experiencing things. Honestly, it really aligns with living intuitively, living from the heart, which is something that I am also really aspiring to do. And this is something that I want to be talking about a lot more in this show. The idea of using our intuition, living intuitively, because I think a lot of us are made to live that way. We are that kind of a person, but we live in a society that forces a certain way of being, a certain way of doing things, and it leaves us feeling like we're not good enough or like we don't belong. But in reality, we have to remember that we live in this capitalistic hellscape that we have to survive and that requires us to constantly be outputting and constantly sharing, especially now with social media. And for a lot of us who are much more introverted, who are neurodivergent, who need time alone and in our inner world, it feels really hard to constantly have to be outputting and feeling like that's the only way that you have worth as a person because that's what society expects of you. And so naturally, that's going to make you feel out of place. Now, the other thing that I was thinking, and the reason why I wanted to talk about reflection is because, as we know, before we can move forward, before we can say what it is that we want to do or what we want to achieve or complete, we have to think about where we've been and what we have learned and tune in with ourselves. Winter is a reminder for us to go inward and to disconnect from external demands and to make time to reflect on our journey. This is something that I feel like a lot of people really take for granted, this concept of reflecting, because they're like, oh, that's just a thing you do when you have time or whenever you get to it. But actually, this is really powerful medicine. When you reflect, you're your best healer, your best guru, your best counselor, therapist, whatever. You become your own best helper. And I say this because when you reflect and you recognize the things that you have been working towards, the things that aren't working anymore, there's nobody that's going to have that insight the way that you do. Like, who can tell you what's best for you but you? And if you're not making time to connect with yourself, how will you know that? And I think this is where we get into really scary territory because I think that a lot of us want to give away our power to somebody else, whether it's a religion, a mentor, a teacher, somebody that we see with more authority, more confident. We give away our power because we think that person knows better. They probably know what's best for me. They seem to know me better than I know me. And we give away that responsibility. Reflection forces us to sit with ourselves, to sit with our feelings, to recognize what it is that we want. And I think that's a scary thing that a lot of people run away from, but really that's where the magic, that's where the medicine is at. Doing this regularly is a powerful, life-changing habit. Now, let's get into some tips that I want to offer if you want to start considering how to apply this idea of reflection into your life so that you can make the most out of it. The first idea that I have for you is not to wait until the end of the year or when someone says is a good time to reflect. This is actually something that you can do regularly. I personally do this through journaling and contemplating most days, noticing how I'm feeling without judging yourself, without saying, oh, this is good or bad, just noticing. That's the first step in growing your awareness. The second idea here that I have is to stop underestimating the power of reflection as something trivial. I want you to start to see that this is something that is critical to your self discovery, to your personal growth, to your healing as a person, to be able to tune into what you're doing and ask yourself how you feel about it, what it is that you're learning through that process. As you reflect more and more, you start to see patterns, you start to pick up on different things that you wouldn't have had you not been in the regular habit of connecting with yourself. Number 3, whenever you're exploring creative expression, keep a process journal or notes about what you're learning about yourself as you create. This is what takes simple creative exercises to the next level. I know this from personal experience. I made art for so many years, and I would just make the art, share it online, wait for the likes, reply to the comments, do it all over. And I didn't really think about my process. I didn't really think about what I was learning about myself. I was really focused on the technique and I wanted to be really good at it and proficient, but I wasn't paying attention to how I felt or what didn't feel good. And recently, it's been probably the last year or so, I realized that I needed to start keeping a process journal. And it's been transformative because now I have so much insight into what's working and what isn't. And for example, I'm trying to think of something I've learned recently. But one of the things is that I noticed I needed to keep my art to myself. I was burnt out on sharing constantly, worrying about being good enough, and being put in this cycle of constantly comparing myself to what other people were doing and how fast they were outputting. And it just wasn't fun. I am glad that I started to do that because had I not, I would have been continuing to do something that I wasn't happy with. And it wouldn't matter if someone said, oh, you could stop or you don't have to do this. Because sometimes people tell you those things, but if you are not tuning into yourself, you don't know what you want. And like I said, who knows better than you? When I started to reflect and notice what was happening, I was able to pinpoint the fact that I was tired of having to perform for an audience. I still love art making, but I just didn't want to have that pressure. It was easier for me to feel good about my decision to stop and not worry about all the things that people worry about when they stop doing something that they think that they have to do. What will people think? Will I be successful? Does this mean I'm a failure? All those kinds of things that come up. So I highly encourage you to keep a process journal. I think that's going to serve you 1,000 times over because self-knowledge is gold, and it's what I'm coming to understand more and more as I get older. But I do think that self-knowledge is everything because ultimately everything that you do in life comes back to that. If you really pay attention, it always comes back to knowing yourself more. Everything comes back to you taking responsibility over your choices, no matter what path you take, whether it's the art path or work or whatever it is that you do that makes you feel like yourself. It's ultimately going to try to teach you something about you. I really feel passionately about it. All right. This brings us to the end of this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. And please subscribe, rate the show, and share with others who you think might benefit. Also, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. This is where I share the latest podcast episodes, offerings, and updates. So please sign up. The link is in the show's description. And thank you for tuning in. I will talk to you on the next one. Until then, stay creative. Bye.